Hi, folks. How's it going this morning? Scott and I are back together again. We're half and half again, and we make the whole. Um, Somebody just put a question in about accessing past classes, and Scott is going to type up that answer. But basically, you can find all of these classes on our YouTube channel. So if you click the little icon right below the video that says Scott and Collette at Pilates on Harrison, that'll take you to our channel. You'll see just any of these half and half classes. Um, from the past and some other kind of old classes from Scott and yoga. We've got videos up from maybe even 10 years ago. So yeah, check those out. Share them with your friends. Hit the little share button and send it off to somebody if you find one that you think someone else would benefit from. We'd love that. So today we're going to talk about extension and work with some ideas with extension. I'm going to start with extension of the spine. And then before we go into spinal extension, we need to get into neutral and really know where neutral is. Um, so if I tend to be like this a lot of us are not really in neutral very well. And then I go into extension, I end up just kind of like compressing a little bit more of everything. So if I can make my way back into a nice long neutral position first, then I'll be longer as I get into some extension work. So let's start lying on your back. Good place to find neutral. Knees bent and feet flat on the mat. And then there's lots of ways to find neutral. I mean, one simple way is just to stay here for a little bit and breathe and let things start to relax. And that's one definition of neutral. Another way we could think about it, the anatomical neutral, would be to feel weight in three distinct places, kind of the three um, masses of your torso: the pelvis, the rib cage, and the head. And if I can feel equal weight in the center of the pelvis, down through the center of the rib cage, and right through the center of the skull, that's a start. And then if I go to the spots that have less mass, that would be in my neck and my lower back, less bony mass. Those are a little lighter. Those would be maybe even not touching the floor. Just a little hovering off the floor in the lower back, and definitely some hovering off the floor in the neck. And it's funny, sometimes when you relax, your lower back actually floats up. When I really relax into neutral, my pelvis gets a little heavier and my lower back gets a little lighter. So it's kind of counterintuitive. And then let's take a couple breaths into your upper back in between your shoulder blades. And see if you could imagine a little more space in between your shoulder blades, wide through your upper back, and wide through the back of your ribs. And same thing here. Sometimes when my upper back gets a little heavier, my shoulders feel just a little lighter. And then my neck relaxes. And then my head feels a little heavier. So we'll take just a few more breaths here, settling in and scanning what your neutral feels like. Just getting a sense of it, your personal neutral position. Doesn't have too much effort. And then roll over onto your side and press yourself up to sitting. So we're going to see if we can feel that same position now on your hands and knees. So a couple things working against us. One, we don't have the feedback of the floor, so it's a little harder to feel how you're lined up. And two, when you're lying on your back, gravity is really helping you drop into neutral, right? Now we're going to have to work a little bit against gravity to find the neutral position of the spine. It's doable, just a little different, a little more challenging. So come onto your hands and knees, and then just approximate what you felt on the floor. Let's start there. So I'm going to think wide back of the pelvis and just kind of a floating feeling in the lower back, not really pulling it up or hanging down, but just like it floats around my lower back. I'm going to think of that wide upper back in between the shoulder blades again. And for almost everybody, the head hangs a little forward. The head's just so heavy that when you get in this position, your head hangs a little too close to the mat. And then a lot of times we fix it by looking out, which isn't really keeping me in neutral. So instead, the back of the head towards the ceiling, the chin floats back towards the ears, the back of the neck really open. Almost like I'm going to get a double chin. A little bit towards that feeling. And then as I do all this, it turns on some muscles in my back, right? Just not like bad work, but just a little bit of more awareness in my spine and my back body. So I'm going to keep that awareness as I go into extension, this kind of medium extension, noticing how my back moves, head to tail, and then back to neutral. So it's not a very big movement, right? Flexion, the round spine, is a pretty big movement. But extension to neutral, it's probably not that big of a movement. So I'm going to think of that long neutral position. And then maybe it even gets a little longer, my tail and my head just slightly floating away from each other. Nice long open curve without sagging in my lower back or crunching in my neck. And then back to a neutral. A couple more of those. And then coming back to child's pose for a couple breaths. And come up to sitting. So I'll also say that it tends to, whenever I do extension, it feels like I'm not doing very much. And then I'll look at a picture and I'll look like I'm actually doing a lot more than it feels like I'm doing in my body. So that's something to remember. If you feel like you're not doing very much at all, sometimes you're doing a lot more than it feels like. And so just let it be kind of small and long and supported. And then your spine will just like find its length, its opening. Because we definitely want a sense of lengthening into neutral before we go into extension, right? We don't want to be in a real compressed place before we do it. So we're going to do that same thing now, lying on your stomach. Little different, but pretty close. So lying on your stomach, feet in parallel. And then again, can I find the neutral position of the spine? So remember when you were on your hands and knees, I said you might feel a little like you had a double chin. A lot of times when people go on their stomach, they either go forehead on the mat, which isn't neutral, or they go kind of chin on the mat, which isn't neutral. So it's a little funny to find that straight down nose hovering off the mat place. It does feel a little like you make that double chin feeling. And then at the same time, I want the wide between the shoulder blades feeling in the rib cage. That makes me work my neck just a little bit to hold my head a little off the floor. So I've got my hands back by my side, my palms facing up. I'm going to start a little support in the belly because it's a Pilates class and the Pilates police will come get me if I don't tell you to use your abdominals at some point. So a little bit of tone in your belly and ribs together. And then let's float your hands slightly off the floor. Just a little. I barely come off the floor. If I was standing up, they'd be right by my side. And that started working my triceps a little and up at the back of my shoulder just a little. Now, pretty similar to what we did before. Think long and then just float head and chest a little bit off the floor. I'm going to look about 6 inches in front of me, not all the way in front of me. Still looking at my mat, but just a little forward. Back to neutral. Let's play with that a couple times. Inhale, long spine, tone in the belly, lengthen, collarbones come up, looking out a little bit, floating back, double chin, tiny, tiny double chin, Andy kitten size double chin. Couple more. And then turn your head to one side, relax everything down. Just take a couple breaths here. And then hands under your shoulders, push back to hands and knees. And let's come onto your back again. So we're going to play a little bit with the mini crunch and how we do the mini crunch. So all the time we do the mini crunch in a way that supports the 100 position or the stomach series position, that holding your head off the floor position, which is really, really useful, really good position to work with. But that means as you come pretty high up. You come up to where the shoulder blades are off the floor, and I have a pretty good flexion position in my spine. Today we're going to play with keeping the spine a little longer and just feel what that's like. So I'm going to have both hands behind my head again, elbows out. All that stuff is the same. And by having my elbows a little lifted, I can feel the space between my shoulder blades. I'm still thinking about my head being heavy in my hands, my pelvis being heavy. And then I'm going to work like I often do, like I probably always do, thinking the ribs together, thinking the belly in. And as the ribs sink down, I'm going to come up, but I'm not going to look into my belly. I'm going to think of the back of the neck being really long. Now, it's a little tricky because as I do that, I don't want to push my chin way forward. I want a little tiny double chin, long back of the neck, definitely working the belly and definitely supporting the weight of my head with my hands. Can you feel that? Real long, still working in the belly, feeling? Lowering back down. So let's play with that movement a couple times. Breathing in, exhale, ribs, lower abdominals, wide upper back, sink the low ribs, and hold the weight of the head just a little off the floor. Then lower back down. A couple more of these. Exhale. Hold it for a moment. See if you can feel all the things. Coming back down. And one more. And lowering back down. And resting here. There's a cat competition going on. I don't know if you can hear it or if you saw the blur of cats chasing each other through here. Let's take a couple breaths just here, like that. So a couple breaths here, head on the floor, neck and upper back relaxed. With all this awareness we're doing with the spine, how's it feel in your back? How's your awareness of your back? Let's try a little shoulder bridge. So feet in line with your sits bones. We're heading into hip extension. So as the hip opens up, as I get this crease to lengthen, that's the extension of the hip. So here we are with this nice long, neutral, open spine. And then we start rolling up, curling the pelvis and rolling up through your spine and thinking of opening the space between your hip bone and your thigh bone. Decreasing that angle. And then rolling back down, one vertebra at a time. And then that hip angle comes back to neutral. And going again. And once you're up here, take a moment. Can you feel the upper back broad? Lengthen the knees a little forward. Feeling the front of the hip a little more extended, a little more open. Rolling back down. And last one. Let's take your left leg. We're going to take it into hip extension by straightening your knee. So this left leg on the floor now has that open, extended hip. Right leg heading towards flexion, holding the back of the thigh. So inhale, the leg reaches up, and exhale, it bends down. And sometimes when my right leg gets straighter, this hip extension isn't so great. So the right leg gets straighter, and then sometimes this left knee bends or my hip curls. All this stuff happens in my spine, especially if the hamstring's a little tighter. So today, we've got this neutral, nice long spine, easy open left hip, and just pay attention to it as your right leg goes up. Can you keep all that undisturbed? And just move the right leg, extending the knee. Right leg goes up, leave it there. Hands come by your side. We're going to circle the right leg, but we're going to be aware of all this other stuff. Staying really in place. Inhale and exhale. Once more. And then reverse it. Last one. And then take the right leg, extend everything down here, and relax everything. So let's set up the right leg on the floor, foot flexed, leg reaches forward, this easy extension in the front of the hip here. Nice setup with neutral and the rest of the body. Grab the back of your left leg. Even there, you might feel it as your left leg comes in. Maybe your right knee wants to bend, or maybe it gets a little tense in your hip. Maybe something happens in your spine. So it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. Just notice it and maybe do a little less, right? Encourage the other. As the leg gets straighter, it gets a little harder to hold all that bending down. One more time, taking the left leg up, hold it there. Hands come down by your side. And then as the left leg circles, everything else stays steady. Easy, wide upper back. Soft, open front of the right hip. Using the abdominals to support all of that. And reverse it. And then relaxing your left leg down and release all that. Take a couple breaths here. And then taking your knees into your chest and roll up to sitting. Okay, let's work your way onto your hands and feet. And take a stretch up with the legs. So this position right here, hanging forward over the legs, there's a lot of your body that's in flexion. Your spine is in flexion, your hips are in flexion. But your shoulders, well, your shoulders are actually in flexion too. I just messed myself up. So yeah, we're in a lot of flexion. So let's bend your knees and roll up to standing. So that there is evidence that Scott and I tend to improvise our classes. And sometimes I just forget what I'm going to do. I was thinking, oh, let's talk about shoulder extension. Well, this isn't shoulder extension. This, again, counterintuitively, is shoulder flexion. Shoulder extension is actually when you take the arm behind you, right? It feels like it should be the other way, but it's not. Taking the arms behind is how we get into extension of the shoulder. And we like that, right? It's nice. It's helpful. So a lot of times we do the strap work, right? We use the strap, we pull in the strap, we do all that. But you can do it without the strap. So let's set up with your hands just right by your side. Your elbows just a little bit soft. And almost like you were pressing your hands into the floor in single leg circles, like we just were set up, or shoulder bridge, like we were just set up. And then see what it's like to float the arms back, keeping the wide shoulder blade position, just like we were working on in neutral. Shoulder blades stay really wide, upper back stays really wide. And probably for a lot of us, the shoulder blades like to come together in this position just a little bit. Head likes to come a little forward out of neutral. It's pretty common. Feels like you get a lot more range. But like I was talking about before, with that spinal extension, sometimes you actually go a lot farther back, even though it doesn't feel like you're going that far. We're going to keep the shoulder blades in place and take the arms back and just see where they get to. Trying not to go wider with your arms and not take your gaze down with your head. And then take your hands right by your side. And take that a couple times. Floating back. And bring it back to center. And floating back. And back to center. And one more time, floating back. This time, leave the arms back there and see if you can feel a little more breath in your chest, in your sternum. Allowing the shoulders to move into that extension makes a little space in the chest. It's kind of nice. And then bring everything down. Okay, let's pass the torch, otherwise known as the AirPod, over to Scott Anderson. Freshly back from a Colorado vacation.
All right, so I don't know about you, but that extension felt really good. I was off running the production and whenever I could, working on finding that extension, especially in the upper back, and it felt so nice. And what we find is that in yoga, there's a lot of that extension that's embedded in kind of unexpected places. So for example, when we take a look at a sun salutation, whether you bring your arms in front to bring them up, or you bring your arms to the side to bring them up in the air, either way, you end up in that extension position. And just like Collette demonstrated, so often what people do is they do that sort of tipping of the head that gives the false sense of creating spine extension, but actually there's just a kink or there's a strain that ends up in the neck. So let's start off with both arms in front. And one of the reasons that this can be a nice position is it automatically opens the upper back. And so Collette mentioned create length in your spine. So invite your legs to drop out of your rib cage. At the same time, float the crown of your head up toward the ceiling. Then right in between your shoulder blades, put a deep inhale. And see if you can keep that space in your upper back as you exhale. Float your arms up and move your spine into extension so your chin goes up too. Let's take a breath here. And then arms down. Let's do that again. Arms forward, long spine. Inhale into your upper back. Exhale, arms up, spine extension. Here for the in-breath. Return with the out-breath. One more. Arms forward. Exhale up. Stay here in-breath. Down with the out-breath. All right. Now let's do some related work. Step your feet wide apart. Turn your left foot in and then your right foot out. And with the exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Let's go up and down a few times. So maybe you're wondering, oh, how does this relate to the theme of extension? Really doesn't. Just good old full body movements. Those of you watching live, kind of movements that get you ready for an active weekend. So next time that knee in the bent position, let's pause there. And that bent leg, that foot, spread your toes out. And once you get a sense that your foot takes up more room on your mat, now with the next exhale, tip your hips. Let's go ahead and bring elbow to knee, other hand to your hip. And now your other foot, that one back there, spread your toes out. Invite that back foot, your left foot, to occupy more surface area on your mat. Now with the next inhale, come on up and turn back to the front. Second side, turn your right foot in, your left foot out. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Up and down like that. The next time that knee in the bent position, let's pause there. The bent leg, spread your toes out. Now with the next out breath, tip your hips, elbow to knee, other hand on your hip. And then that back leg foot, spread those toes out. See if you can feel all 5 toes spreading out. Colette was making fun of me the other night that my toes have lost some of their mobility over the past few years. See if you can spread those feet out. Take up more surface area on your mat. And with the next inhale, come on up. Turn back to the front. And then step your feet back together. Alrighty. So that helped mobilize hips, knees, ankles, and maybe gave you a little bit more of a sense of feeling for your feet. So now as you stand here, spread your toes out best you can and root down. Now, as you maintain that quality of rootedness, now to start to more directly explore hip extension, bring awareness to your pelvic crest, those bones right here in the front, and slightly lift your pelvic crest up toward the ceiling. Now, how do you know whether or not you're doing that? When you lift your pelvic crest, automatically you stand a little taller. Now, as we take a few breaths here, lifting your pelvic crest, check to make sure you're not doing that by tucking your tailbone. Let your tail relax and let your belly muscles be what lifts your pelvic crest, not tensing your pelvic floor muscles. All right, so now let's deepen the degree to which we're creating hip extension. Take your right foot, step it back a little bit. Hands on your hips. Keep that lift of your pelvic crest. Right heel, inhale, lift it to come forward. Exhale, descend it to come back. Let's do that twice more. The next time that back heel is lifted, let's pause there. Pelvic crest, continue to lift up. Then to help create more length in your right iliopsoas muscle, take that right heel back behind you and down to the floor. Lengthen. So that's hip extension. Lengthen your iliopsoas muscle. And once you feel your right heel on the floor, bring both arms forward. Remember how we took the arms up toward the ceiling? We did spine extension to do so. Do the same thing here. Start with the in-breath. Exhale up. Here for the inhale. Exhale back to standing. Let's take a moment here. Two sides of your body feel the same? And if not, what's the feeling on one side? What's the feeling on the other side? All right, let's do the excuse me, the other side. So now take your left foot, step it back a bit. Lift to the pelvic crests. Hold your head up high. Hands to your hips. Left heel. Inhale, lifts to come forward. Exhale, descends to come back. Next time that back heel lifted, let's pause there. Keeping that lift of your pelvic crest. Remember, sourcing it from your belly, not by tucking your tail. Remember, tuck the tail as a fear response. To help lengthen, release your left iliopsoas. Descend your left heel until you feel it contact the floor. Then with that left heel grounded, bring both arms forward. Long spine, inhale, fill your upper back. Exhale up. Stay here for the in-breath. Back to standing with the out breath. All right, so now bilaterally, releasing the iliopsoas muscles into elongation. Both pelvic crests lift. Both arms forward. Inhale, fill your upper back. Exhale, lengthen the whole front of your body as you take your arms up. And then inhale, fold forward. So go from extension to flexion. And let your head hang. A few breaths here in flexion. As Collette pointed out, this is spine flexion. This is hip flexion. This is knee flexion. We got a whole lot of flexion going on. So let's introduce just a little bit of extension to the flexion. With the next out breath, reach the crown of your head forward, move your spine into extension. Couple breaths here. And then stepping your feet back to head down dog. Good old yoga pose, head down dog. Let's take 3 a little bit deeper breaths here. And then come on down. So remember, way back at the beginning, you started off on your back to get a sense of neutral spine alignment. Then you carried that sense forward into hands and knees. Let's take a few moments quietly to reconnect to that neutral spine position here on hands and knees. All right, so see if you can keep this neutral spine positioning in head down dog. So that's going to be a little bit different. Typically we let the head passively hang in dog. And now we're going to keep neck and head lined up with the rest of the torso. So keeping that lined upness as you move back to head down dog. The spine, neck, and head remain in alignment. Let's take a few breaths here. And then best you can, keep that spine alignment as you return to hands and knees. And just like you did a little bit earlier, move from a neutral spine to spine extension. So you look a little bit forward, not a whole heck of a lot. Often doesn't feel like much, even though it look maybe pretty visible from the outside. Then from spine extension back to spine neutral. Maintaining neutral spine as you move into dog pose. Now in dog pose, there's that wall back there. Move your thighs and your butt back toward that wall. And see if you can keep your hips where they are as you move from spine neutral to spine extension. And I sometimes call this the alternate upward dog or the alternate head up dog. Maintaining the extension here. From spine extension back to neutral spine. Now just add a little bit of fun to this. Maintain your neutral spine as you move from head down dog to straight arm plank. And to help build strength, we'll hold here in straight arm plank for a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Back to head down dog, neutral spine, head down dog. And then come on down. So that's a lot of time on the hands. Let's go ahead and give hands a break. Move on to your back. And just like explore it at the outset, when you use this time on the back to let the feeling of a neutral spine imprint in your body memory. So feeling how the back of your pelvis contacts the floor, how across your upper back contacts the floor, and the back of your head contacts the floor. So let's take a few more breaths here, nothing you need to do, but to let this feeling sink into your body memory. This can help you stand taller and sit with better posture as you get up from this session and go about your day. Right. So now let's create a little bit of spine flexion. Posteriorly tip your pelvis. And then further flex your spine to lift your hips up. So we use spine flexion to end up in spine neutral. And maintain that posterior tilt to the pelvis to help release your iliopsoas muscles into lengthening. And we'll take a few more breaths here. Right now I'm feeling a pretty healthy tug, really deep, low down in my belly. And now let's go from spine neutral and use spine extension to lower down, spine flexion to lower down segment by segment, piece by piece, coming down. All right, that's a lot of terminology. So let's pare it down this time. So take your pelvis, tip it backward. Keep that backward tilt of your pelvis as you lift your hips up. Now, as you do so, maybe you can feel how your spine has sort of a fluid movement as it lifts up, piece by piece. Then, provided you maintain that backward tilt of your pelvis, maybe you're starting to feel a little bit of a lengthening deep in your belly, maybe a little bit of something in your quads. And then keep that backward tip of your pelvis as you come down, lowering your spine down with a serpentine quality. And a few breaths here. All right, now roll onto your belly. So we're going to reprise something else. So hands right next to your armpits, toes pointed back. As your toes reach into the space back behind you, reach the crown of your head forward in front of you. And then with the next out breath, create extension, hip extension, spine extension. So let's keep hands where they are for the time being. Holding here for count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come on back down, back to spine neutral. And float your hands, reaching back just like you did at the outset with Collette. And with the next out breath, whole body extension, hip extension, spine extension. Couple breaths here. And come come on down. And pushing up to hands and knees. And then back to down dog. So I leave it to you to which version of dog you do. You could do the let your head passively hang dog. You could do a neutral spine dog. Or if you prefer, alternate upward dog, which is the spine extension dog. So whichever choice you're making, we'll take a few more breaths here. And then come on down. And then we'll take a few moments for guided relaxation. Let's find a position on your back. So whether on the floor or a bed or a sofa, a reclining chair can work really nicely too. Find a position that is as comfortable as possible. And then if you feel comfortable doing so, close your eyes. And we could spend the rest of the day with a guided relaxation going from point to point, place to place. There's often a power in working with things in groups of three. So relaxing three places to impact the whole. Invite awareness to your scalp and forehead. And invite scalp and forehead to relax. So often, it's often like the scalp and the forehead are sort of gripping the skull. So invite them to release that grip. So now inviting awareness to your belly, especially your lower belly. Invite the lower belly and its contents to relax. Now to the tops of your feet. Invite the tops of your feet to relax. So having worked with scalp and forehead, belly, tops of your feet. If you closed your eyes, now open your eyes. And then as you feel ready, come on up to sitting. All right. So last week was whole and none. This week, back to half and half. Good to be back here with you all. Any comments, questions today? Looks kind of quiet. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to join us, and let's do this again really soon. Bye-bye, everybody.